What if the reason you suffer is not because life is cruel, but because you keep asking changing things to stay the same? What if your fear is not really fear of loss, but fear of seeing that nothing was ever yours to hold forever? And what if the peace you have been searching for is not hiding in some distant future, but waiting for you in the simple truth you have tried to avoid for so long? Many people think suffering comes only when something painful happens. They think suffering begins when love leaves, when money disappears, when the body becomes weak, when plans collapse, or when death comes near. But the Buddha pointed to something even deeper. He showed that suffering begins much earlier than that. It begins in the silent demand of the mind that says, "Stay this way, stay with me. Do not change, do not leave, do not age, do not end." That demand is subtle, but it lives inside many hearts. It hides behind our dreams, behind our attachments, behind our fear of uncertainty, and even behind our strongest hopes. We want success to remain. We want youth to remain. We want praise to remain. We want health to remain. We want people to remain exactly as they were when we first loved them. We want our own identity to remain stable and clear. We want tomorrow to obey the promises we made in yesterday's imagination. But life does not move that way. Life flows. It changes in every breath, in every season, in every relationship, in every thought. The body changes. Feelings change. Circumstances change. Nations change. Families change. Even the person you were this morning is already gone. The Buddha did not teach impermanence to make people sad. He did not teach it so that we would become cold, hopeless, or detached from life in a dry and lifeless way. He taught impermanence because truth liberates. When you see clearly that all conditioned things rise and pass away, you stop building your peace on what cannot stay. Then peace no longer depends on people obeying your wishes. It no longer depends on the world matching your plans. It no longer depends on a perfect mood, a perfect relationship, a perfect body, a perfect income, or a perfect tomorrow. It begins to come from wisdom. There is a kind of calm that is exhausted because it is forced. It is the calm of someone who bites their tongue, clenches their heart, and pretends to be okay. But there is another kind of calm that the Buddha pointed to. It is not the calm of suppression. It is the calm that comes when the illusion of control starts to loosen. It is the calm of understanding. It is the calm of a mind that no longer argues with the nature of reality. So listen carefully, not only with your ears, but with the tender places in your life where you still ache, where you still wait, where you still fear, where you still cling. Because this teaching is not for monks alone, not for temples alone, not for the old, and not only for those who have already suffered greatly. This teaching is for every human being who has ever loved something that changed. It is for every heart that has broken because it tried to hold a moving river in its hands. And before we go deeper, let me gently welcome you. You are listening to Buddha Peaceful Mind. If these reflections bring a little clarity to your heart, you may stay close to this space, perhaps by following, liking, or subscribing, so we can continue walking this path together in wisdom and compassion. Now let us begin with a question so simple that many people pass by it without seeing its power. In your own life, what hurts you more? Is it the changing event itself, or the part of your mind that says this should not be happening? And another question for you. When something precious begins to fade, do you hold it tighter? Or do you learn to love it more gently? Hold these questions softly in your heart, because by the end of this journey, they may open a door you did not know was there. The Buddha often invited people to look directly, not merely to believe. He did not say, "Accept this because it sounds beautiful." He said, "Come and see. Look at the body, it changes. Look at emotions, they change. Look at thoughts, they change. Look at the weather of the mind, it comes and goes. Look at the faces of those you love. Every year writes a new line on them. Look at your opinions. They change with time, pain, learning, and experience. Look at the world around you. Morning becomes evening. Spring becomes summer. Gain becomes loss. Meeting becomes parting. Birth becomes death. This is not punishment. This is the law of conditioned existence. Yet what do? We stand in the middle of a flowing river and demand that the water become still. We look at a sunset and ask it not to disappear. We hold a child and secretly wish they would never grow. We fall in love and quietly ask life to freeze one beautiful moment forever. We build an image of ourselves and spend years protecting it. We collect possessions, titles, and roles, and then call them identity. Then when the river flows, when the sunset fades, when the child grows, when the relationship changes, when the role ends, or when the body weakens, we call that tragedy. Sometimes it is painful, yes, sometimes deeply painful. But much of our torment comes not only from the event, but from our refusal to move with reality. A leaf does not suffer because it leaves the branch in autumn. The cloud does not grieve because it cannot remain one shape. The wave does not fear because it will fall back into the sea. Nature changes without argument. Human beings suffer because we add story, resistance, and ownership. We say, my youth, my beauty, my success, my child, my home, my body, my idea, my reputation, my person, my life. Then impermanence touches what we called mine, and suddenly the heart trembles. But the Buddha did not ask us to stop loving. He asked us to love with wisdom. There is a profound difference. Attachment says, I need you to remain in order for me to be okay. Wisdom says, I cherish you while you are here, and I will not deny the law that touches all things. Attachment says, do not change. Wisdom says, because you will change, I will meet you fully now. Attachment tightens. Wisdom softens. Attachment lives in fear. Wisdom lives in presence. Imagine holding a butterfly in your hand. If you grip too hard, you harm it. If you open your hand completely in fear, you may never really meet it. But if you hold gently, with care and respect for its fragility, then there is beauty. This is how the Buddha's teaching transforms the heart. It does not make us distant. It makes us tender without illusion. Many people hear the word impermanence and feel discouraged. They think, if everything changes, then nothing matters. But the Buddha's teaching points in the opposite direction. Because everything changes, everything matters deeply. Because this moment cannot be repeated, it is precious. Because your parents will not be here forever, your kindness matters. Because your child will not stay small, your patience matters. Because your own life is uncertain, your honesty matters. Because anger does not last forever, forgiveness is possible. Because pain changes, healing is possible. Because confusion changes, awakening is possible. Impermanence is not a sentence of despair. It is the opening through which compassion, urgency, humility, and freedom enter the human heart. If your sadness were permanent, how could you heal? If your mistakes were permanent, how could you grow? If your fear were permanent, how could courage arise? If injustice were permanent, how could transformation happen? Impermanence is the reason seasons turn. It is the reason wounds close. It is the reason a prisoner can become wise. A selfish person can become kind. And a grieving heart can learn to breathe again. So the teaching is not telling you, do not care. It is telling you, care with open eyes. Care without illusion. Care without trying to turn passing things into permanent shelters. Care enough to be awake. There is a small story I once heard about an old clay cup. A man owned a simple handmade cup that he loved very much. It had no gold on it, no rare value, no proud history. But every morning he drank tea from that cup, and over time it became part of his life. One day a friend saw how carefully he washed it and asked, "Why are you so gentle with such an ordinary thing?" The man smiled and said, "Because it is already broken." His friend was confused. The cup was whole. It sat in his hands without a crack. But the man explained, "One day this cup will fall. One day it will slip from my hand, or the shelf will shake, or time will weaken the clay. If I pretend it will last forever, I will not truly appreciate it while it is here. But because I know it is already broken in the future, I hold it with gratitude now." Every morning, tea becomes a miracle. This is a beautiful doorway into the Buddha's teaching. To say that something is already broken does not mean we become negative. It means we stop pretending that anything material can escape change. And once we stop pretending, gratitude becomes natural. Instead of saying, "This should stay forever," we begin to say, "How wonderful that it is here today." Instead of taking life for granted, we bow inwardly to its fragility. Think about the people in your life. Your mother is already changing. Your father is already changing. Your children are already changing. Your friends are already changing. Even the person who hurt you is changing. You are not meeting static beings. You are meeting passing forms in a passing world. When this is seen deeply, arrogance softens. Resentment softens. Delay softens. We stop saying, "Someday I will apologize. Someday I will listen. Someday I will visit. Someday I will thank them. Someday I will live." The Buddha's teaching on impermanence whispers, "Do not wait too long." There are people who lived as though life had endless tomorrows. They postponed love because they were busy. They postponed peace because they wanted one more achievement. They postponed rest because they believed they could control time. Then suddenly illness entered the room, or parting entered the family, or age touched the body, or a phone call changed everything. And in that moment, many realize what impermanence had been teaching quietly all along. Life was never guaranteed. The invitation was always now. A woman once spent years collecting beautiful dishes that she never used. She told herself they were for a special occasion. She feared they might chip or fade or be wasted on ordinary days. Then one afternoon, she learned that someone she loved had only a short time left to live. In her grief, something became clear. She opened the cabinet that evening, set the table with the finest dishes, lit a candle, and served a simple meal. While tears moved in her eyes, she understood that the special occasion had always been life itself. This is why the Buddha's teaching does not make life smaller. It makes life sacred. It removes the dream that we can secure permanence, and in doing so, it reveals the radiant vulnerability of being alive. The cup can break. The flower can wilt. The child will grow. The body will age. The meeting will end. The season will pass. Because of this, let us not sleep through what is here. If you are listening right now, perhaps ask yourself quietly, what in my life have I been postponing until some imagined perfect time? A conversation, a forgiveness, a thank you, a prayer, a change, a beginning, a return to what matters. Impermanence is not telling you to panic. It is inviting you to awaken. Not tomorrow, now. The Buddha also taught that much of human suffering comes from misunderstanding what we are. We say, I am this body, this role, this success, this pain, this memory, this story. Then when the body changes, when the role ends, when success disappears, when pain comes, when memory fades, when story shifts, we feel as though the ground itself has been stolen from us. But what if the problem is not merely that things change? What if the problem is that we build identity out of changing things? Consider how many selves you have already been. The child who feared the dark, the teenager who longed to be accepted, the young adult who wanted to prove something, the one who fell in love, the one who was betrayed, the one who succeeded, the one who failed, the one who once believed ideas that now seem small. Which one is the permanent you? Where is the solid self that never altered? The Buddha invited us to look carefully and discover that what we call self is often a bundle of changing processes: body, feeling, perception, reactions, consciousness, always moving, always arising and passing. This insight is not meant to erase your humanity. It is meant to free you from clinging to a fixed image. When you stop defending a rigid self, life becomes lighter. Criticism does not wound as deeply because there is less pride to protect. Praise does not intoxicate as strongly because there is less vanity to feed. Failure does not destroy you because you are not reduced to one event. Success does not define you because you know it too will pass. A man once spent many years introducing himself by his profession. Every conversation returned to what he did, what he achieved, what others thought of him. His work became not only his livelihood, but his identity. Then one day, he lost his position. At first, he felt as if his life had ended. He became angry, ashamed, and bitter. But over time, through silence and reflection, he began to notice something surprising. The trees were still green. The sky still opened each morning. Tea still had warmth. Birds still sang without asking his title. Slowly, he discovered a painful but beautiful lesson. He had not only lost a job, he had lost an illusion about who he was. Beneath the role, there was still awareness, still life, still a heart capable of kindness. Many people live inside a name and die before discovering their true depth. They cling to labels: husband, wife, teacher, leader, victim, winner, failure, and then defend these labels as if they were the soul itself. But labels are garments. Useful, yes. Necessary at times, yes. But not ultimate. When garments change, the sky of awareness remains. This is why wisdom brings a special kind of peace. Not because nothing painful happens, but because the center of gravity shifts. You no longer stand on what is unstable and demand security from it. You begin to stand in seeing itself, in presence itself, in the quiet knowing that all experiences come and go. Joy visits, sorrow visits, health visits, illness visits, praise visits, blame visits, gain visits, loss visits. You welcome them, learn from them, and let them move on. You stop trying to turn guests into permanent residents. And when you see others through this lens, compassion deepens. The person who is rude today is not a fixed monster. The person who is kind today is not permanently gentle. The person who is confused today is not forever lost. Everyone is a moving stream of causes and conditions. This does not excuse harmful actions, but it softens hatred. It reminds us that all beings are caught in changing conditions, often acting from wounds they do not understand. So when the Buddha taught impermanence, he was not merely giving a philosophical lesson. He was loosening the chains of identity. He was showing us that freedom begins when we stop trying to carve eternity out of sand. Let me share another small story. There was once a farmer whose horse ran away. The neighbors came and said, "What terrible misfortune." The farmer simply replied, "Maybe." A few days later, the horse returned, bringing with it several wild horses from the hills. The neighbors came again and said, "What wonderful fortune." The farmer replied, "Maybe." Later, the farmer's son tried to ride one of the wild horses, fell, and broke his leg. The neighbors cried, "What bad luck!" The farmer answered, "Maybe." Soon after, soldiers came to the village to take every healthy young man into a brutal war. The son was spared because of his injury. Again, the neighbor said, "What good fortune!" The farmer only said, "Maybe." This old story points to something the Buddha wanted us to understand. Much of our emotional suffering comes from the speed with which we judge events. We say, "This is good, this is bad, this should happen, this should not happen." But life is woven from countless conditions, far beyond what one moment reveals. The event you resist today may open a hidden door tomorrow. The pleasure you cling to today may ripen into future sorrow. The one who praises you today may abandon you later. The one who criticizes you today may save you from a greater mistake. Who can fully see the whole tapestry from one thread? Impermanence humbles our judgments. It teaches us not to be passive, but to be less arrogant in our certainty. Sometimes the mind reacts before wisdom has even entered the room. A message arrives, we panic. A plan fails, we despair. A compliment comes, we soar. A harsh word lands, we collapse. But the Buddha invites a quieter response. Breathe, watch, let the first wave pass. See more deeply. A person grounded in wisdom does not become lifeless. They can still feel grief, joy, disappointment, and delight. But they are less likely to be kidnapped by each passing condition. They know that feelings are weather, not identity. They know that one moment does not define a life. They know that a door closing is not the end of existence. They know that waves rise and waves fall. Think of how many times in your life you believed, "This will destroy me," and yet you are here, listening now. Think of how many tears once seemed endless, and now they are part of a memory. Think of how many fears once filled your chest, and now they have dissolved into lessons. This is not to make light of pain. It is to remind you that mind states move, circumstances move, inner seasons change. When the Buddha teaches us to contemplate impermanence, he is helping us loosen the drama made by the mind. Not the reality of pain, but the extra suffering caused by exaggeration, projection, and attachment. We suffer once from the event itself, then many more times from the stories we tell. We suffer from memory, from anticipation, from comparison, from fantasy, from the insistence that life should be different. Wisdom begins to reduce those unnecessary layers. So perhaps the next time something unexpected happens, before calling it a disaster or a blessing, leave a little room in the heart. Say, "This too is part of a changing world. Let me meet it carefully. Let me respond rather than react. Let me not hand my peace over to the first interpretation of the mind." Many people believe that spiritual calm means never feeling sadness, never feeling anger, never trembling, never being touched. But this is not the Buddha's way. The awakened heart is not stone. It is not numbness. It is not distance dressed as wisdom. True calm is not the absence of feeling. It is freedom in the middle of feeling. When rain falls on a lake, the surface may ripple, yet the depth remains undisturbed. In the same way, the wise person may still feel the ripples of human life. Tears may come, the heart may ache, the body may shake. But underneath there is knowing. Underneath there is space. Underneath there is no blind identification. Sadness is known as sadness. Anger is known as anger. Fear is known as fear. These states are not denied, and they are not worshipped. They are seen. This is a crucial difference. Most suffering grows because we become what we feel. We do not say anger is present. We say, "I am angry." And from there, the whole self is taken over. We do not say grief is moving through the heart. We say, "My life is ruined." We do not say fear has arisen. We say, "I cannot survive this." The Buddha taught us to look with mindfulness, so that feeling remains feeling, thought remains thought, sensation remains sensation. Once there is seeing, there is space. Once there is space, there is choice. Once there is choice, there is freedom. A mother once sat beside the bed of her sick child night after night. She prayed, worried, and wept. A friend later asked her, "Did your spiritual practice take away your pain?" She answered, "No, it made my pain honest. I still cried, but I did not drown in the cry. I still feared, but I also saw the fear. I still loved, but I stopped demanding guarantees from life. In that honesty, I found strength." This is beautiful. The path does not always remove the storm. Sometimes it teaches you how not to become the storm. Sometimes it teaches you how to keep the lamp lit while wind moves through the room. So when you hear phrases like, "Do not cling," or "let go," do not imagine that you are being told to stop caring. Letting go does not mean dropping love. It means dropping the demand that love must come with control. It means dropping the illusion that care requires possession. It means dropping the belief that pain is proof of failure. Sometimes letting go simply means allowing reality to be real. Imagine trying to hold water tightly. The harder you squeeze, the less remains in your hand. But if you cup your hands gently, water can rest there for a moment. This is the difference between clinging and caring. Clinging tries to imprison life. Caring honors life while it passes through. The Buddha's teaching invites us to become wide enough for experience. Not because experience becomes easier, but because the heart becomes less entangled. This is why a truly wise person can feel deeply and yet remain steady. They do not suppress tears. They do not pretend to be above pain. They simply do not build a prison out of passing states. So if you are suffering today, do not add another burden by trying to be spiritually perfect. Do not force yourself into fake calm. Sit with what is true. Breathe with what is present. Notice the changing nature of the experience. Notice that even this feeling has movement. Even this pain is not fixed. Even this dark hour is not permanent. This is how wisdom begins to hold sorrow with compassion. There is one of the most well-known stories in the Buddhist tradition, the story of Kisa Gotami. She was a mother whose only child died. Overwhelmed by grief, she carried the child from place to place, begging for medicine that could bring him back. People thought she had gone mad from sorrow. Finally, someone sent her to the Buddha. She came before him desperate, pleading for help. The Buddha did not lecture her coldly. He did not say, "Your child is dead, accept it." He gave her a task. He told her to go into the town and bring back a mustard seed from any house where no one had ever died. Filled with hope, she began knocking on doors. At each house, people were willing to give mustard seeds, but when she asked whether death had ever touched the family, the answer was always the same. A father had died, a mother had died, a sister, a husband, a child, a grandparent. Everywhere she went, grief had already visited. By evening, something had changed in her. Her pain was still pain, but it was no longer isolated. She began to see that loss was not a personal punishment. It was part of the human condition. She returned to the Buddha without the mustard seed, but with a deeper understanding. Through this seeing, the fire of blind grief began to soften. This story is not telling us that pain is easy. It is showing us that wisdom and compassion transform the way pain is held. Grief often becomes unbearable when the mind whispers, "Why me? Why this? Why now? Why my child? Why my life?" But when one sees that all beings are subject to parting, all bodies are subject to death, all unions are subject to separation, the grief is no longer sharpened by the illusion that something impossible should have been guaranteed. This does not erase tears. It removes loneliness from the tears. It removes accusation from the tears. It removes some of the fighting from the tears. There is a sacred humility in realizing that everyone you meet has been touched by impermanence. The person smiling at the market may have buried someone they loved. The colleague sitting quietly near you may be carrying the ache of a broken marriage. The stranger who seems impatient may be terrified of losing their health. The elderly person across the street may have outlived almost everyone from their youth. The child laughing in a field will one day know the taste of goodbye. To understand impermanence is to become gentler, because you realize you are walking among hearts that are far more fragile than they appear. The Buddha's teaching is not only medicine for private suffering, it is the source of compassion. When you know that all beings lose what they love, you become less harsh. When you know that all beings age, become ill, and die, you become less proud. When you know that every joy is temporary, you become more grateful. When you know that every sorrow is shared by countless others, you become less self-enclosed. Perhaps there is someone in your life right now who needs not advice, but understanding. Not correction, but tenderness. Not your opinion, but your quiet presence. Impermanence teaches us that every meeting may be more precious than we realize. One day the chance to speak kindly will be gone. One day the chance to forgive will be gone. One day the chance to sit beside someone in silence will be gone. So if there is someone you love, do not wait forever to show it. If there is someone you need to forgive, begin while the heart is still warm enough to open. If there is someone you need to thank, let gratitude become action. Impermanence is not only a truth to understand, it is a bell that calls the heart to wake up and love wisely. Now let us look at success and failure, because these two words rule many lives. People rise in the morning already measuring themselves. Am I ahead or behind? Am I admired or ignored? Am I winning or losing? Am I becoming someone, or am I fading? Much suffering comes from building identity on these shifting sands. The Buddha saw clearly that both success and failure are unstable. Success is sweet, but it passes. Failure is bitter, but it also passes. Praise arrives, then it fades. Blame burns, then it fades. Gain comes, then it changes. Loss hurts, then it changes. These are called worldly winds, and the ordinary mind is blown in every direction by them. One day happy because of approval, next day broken because of criticism. One day proud because of gain, next day ashamed because of loss. This is an exhausting way to live. Imagine a flag in a strong wind. It cannot rest because every movement in the air shakes it. Many people live like that flag. Their mood, worth, and self-image depend on what others say, how markets move, how plans unfold, whether the body looks young, whether they are included, whether they are admired. But the Buddha teaches us to root more deeply. When worth depends on changing winds, peace will never last. A young artist once showed her work to a group of people. Some praised it warmly, others dismissed it. For days, her mind swung back and forth. When she heard praise, she felt gifted. When she heard criticism, she felt worthless. Finally, an older teacher told her, "If you drink praise like wine, you will also drink blame like poison. Learn to receive both without becoming either. Keep working, keep learning, keep bowing to the truth rather than to applause." This is not a call to indifference. Feedback can help. Achievement can serve. Failure can teach. But none of them can safely hold the weight of who you are. When success comes, enjoy it without intoxication. When failure comes, learn from it without collapse. This is freedom. How many people have become arrogant in victory, only to be humbled later? How many have despaired in defeat, only to discover that defeat prepared them for a wiser life? A person loses a business and learns simplicity. A person loses status and finds compassion. A person is rejected and discovers self-respect. A person achieves everything they wanted and still feels empty. Then begins the search for meaning. Who can say what one event will become in the full unfolding of a life? If you are in a season of success, remember impermanence and stay humble. Use your blessings well. Share them. Do not build your throne upon them. If you are in a season of failure, remember impermanence and stay patient. This moment is not the whole sky. This pain is not your final name. Sometimes what we call failure is merely the breaking of an old identity. Sometimes what we call success is only the temporary reward of conditions coming together. Either way, both are passing weather. The wise person does not stop acting. They simply stop kneeling before results. So ask yourself quietly, when things go well, do I become inflated? When things go badly, do I become destroyed? Or can I learn to stand in a place deeper than both victory and defeat? This does not happen through coldness. It happens through insight. The more deeply you understand impermanence, the less the worldly winds can own your heart. Relationships reveal impermanence in some of the most painful ways. We meet someone and feel that life has changed color. The heart opens, the future glows. We imagine years, promises, and a stable world built around this bond. But people are not statues. They change. Their feelings change. Their wounds change. Their values change. Their capacity changes. Our own hearts change too. Sometimes love deepens. Sometimes it grows quieter. Sometimes it transforms. Sometimes it leaves. This is why love can be such a powerful teacher. When we love without wisdom, we often make the other person carry impossible burdens. We ask them to heal our insecurity, confirm our worth, protect us from loneliness, remain exactly how we first knew them, and never awaken any fear in us. That is too much for any human being. Eventually the strain shows. Then disappointment enters. The Buddha's teaching does not say, do not love. It says, see clearly what love becomes when mixed with clinging. Clinging says, you belong to me. Wisdom says, I am grateful to walk beside you while causes and conditions allow it. Clinging says, if you change, I am betrayed. Wisdom says, change is the nature of life, so let us meet each other honestly. Clinging says, I will suffer less if I control you. Wisdom says, control is not intimacy. There was once an elderly couple who had lived together for many decades. A younger person asked them the secret of their long companionship. The old woman smiled and said, we did not spend our life trying to own each other. We kept meeting each new version of the other with fresh eyes. The man I married at 20 was not the man beside me at 40. The one at 40 was not the one at 70. If I kept demanding that he remain who he once was, I would have lost him many times over. Instead, I learned to greet who was here. What a wise answer. Many relationships break not only because change occurs, but because one or both people deny that change is occurring. They cling to an image and resent reality for moving. To love wisely is to keep waking up. It is to see the person before you as living, changing, vulnerable, and temporary, just like you. This teaching also helps when relationships end. The end of a relationship can feel like death because a future dies with it. An identity dies with it. A world of habit and meaning dies with it. The pain is real, but the Buddha would gently ask, what exactly are you grieving? The person, the dreams, the role, the comfort, the wounded pride, the fear of starting again. When grief is looked at carefully, understanding grows. Sometimes the deepest suffering after a breakup is not the parting itself, but the insistence that the parting should not have happened. Sometimes we replay memories and bargain with life, but wisdom slowly invites another posture. Yes, this was precious. Yes, it ended. Yes, the heart hurts. And yes, life continues to move. If you are loving someone now, love them with tenderness, honesty, and humility. Do not waste years waiting to become fully present. Listen while you can. Speak kindly while you can. Say what matters while you can. And if you have been hurt, let impermanence remind you that your pain is not fixed. Your story is not finished. And the heart can flower again in ways you cannot yet imagine. The body is one of our greatest teachers of impermanence, yet it is also one of the places where we resist it most fiercely. In youth, many imagine that time will move slowly. Strength feels natural. Recovery feels easy. The face in the mirror appears familiar and stable. But the Buddha invited us to contemplate the body not with disgust, but with honesty. This body changes from the first breath. It grows, ripens, weakens, and passes away. No one bargains with this law successfully. This truth can be frightening when first seen. We live in cultures that celebrate youth, deny aging, and hide death behind closed doors. Many are trained to feel ashamed of wrinkles, afraid of sickness, and offended by mortality. But denial does not protect the heart. It leaves the mind unprepared. Then when illness comes, panic becomes stronger, because reality seems like an insult rather than a law. A man once spent years building his life around physical appearance. He exercised not for health, but for admiration. He feared every sign of age. When gray hair began to appear, he became restless. When his strength declined after an illness, he became depressed. It was not only the body that was aging, it was an identity built on the body that was collapsing. Later, in recovery, he said something simple and true. I never knew how much I worshipped the body until it stopped obeying me. The Buddha does not teach contempt for the body. He teaches wise relationship. Care for it, but do not call it permanent. Nourish it, but do not worship it. Respect it, but do not build your whole worth upon it. This body is a vehicle, a temporary home, a field for practice. It deserves compassion, rest, and mindful care. But because it changes, it cannot safely serve as the final ground of identity. When illness comes, the mind often adds a cruel second arrow. The first arrow is the physical pain itself. The second arrow is mental anguish. Why me? This should not be happening. I am ruined. I am no longer worthy. I cannot accept this body. The Buddha taught that while we may not always avoid the first arrow, we can learn not to drive the second one deeper. Even aging, when seen with wisdom, can become a doorway. It humbles vanity. It softens comparison. It clarifies priorities. It strips away some illusions of endless time. There are elderly people whose bodies are fragile, yet whose presence feels vast and luminous because they have stopped fighting the truth of change. Their peace does not come from youthful strength. It comes from reconciliation with reality. And what of death? The Buddha did not ask us to obsess over death in a dark or morbid way. He asked us to remember it so that we live more truthfully. Death is not the opposite of life. It is woven into life. To remember death is to stop wasting your days on what does not matter. It is to become sincere. It is to let pettiness fall away more quickly. It is to ask, if this day were precious, how would I use my speech, my attention, my time, my heart? So when you look at the body, let it teach you. Let each gray hair whisper urgency. Let each scar teach tenderness. Let each breath remind you that life is borrowed and beautiful. The body changes. This is not a failure. It is the way of the world. In understanding this, fear slowly becomes reverence. Perhaps one of the hardest areas of life to surrender is the desire to control outcomes. The mind loves plans. It loves certainty. It loves maps, guarantees, and promises. It wants to know that if I do this, then that will happen. If I am good, I will be rewarded. If I work hard, I will be safe. If I love sincerely, I will not be abandoned. If I prepare carefully, nothing will go wrong. Yet anyone who has lived even a little can see that life does not always follow these neat equations. The Buddha did not say that effort is useless. Far from it. He taught right effort, wise action, ethical living, clear intention. But he also showed that effort does not give us ownership over results. Causes and conditions are vast. You can plant a seed, water it, protect it, and still a storm may come. You can raise a child with love, and still they must walk through their own karma, choices, and pain. You can build a good business, and still markets may change. You can care for the body, and still illness may arise. Wise effort matters, but control is never complete. This insight is painful for the ego, because the ego wants to be the ruler. It wants the world to be a machine, where enough intelligence or discipline can guarantee desired outcomes. But life is not a machine. It is a field of interdependent conditions, subtle and immeasurable. When you understand this deeply, arrogance softens. So does guilt. You still take responsibility, but you stop pretending omnipotence. A gardener once tended a small orchard. He worked every morning before sunrise. He watered, pruned, fed the soil, and guarded the trees from pests. One year, a harsh frost came unexpectedly and destroyed most of the blossoms. At first, he was heartbroken. Then an older neighbor told him, "Your work was not wasted because the fruit did not come. The care itself was part of the path. Next year, there may be fruit. This year, there is learning." What a freeing truth. So often people judge their effort only by results. If the relationship did not last, was the love meaningless? If the project failed, was the work meaningless? If the kindness was not appreciated, was the kindness meaningless? But in the Buddha's teaching, intention matters deeply. The state of heart with which you act matters deeply. A compassionate action remains meaningful even in uncertain conditions. This is why understanding impermanence does not lead to laziness. It leads to non-attachment in action. You still do your best. You still speak truth. You still care, build, serve, and love. But you gradually release the feverish demand that life must repay you in the exact form you imagined. You sow seeds without claiming ownership over the rain. How much anxiety would loosen if people truly accepted this? They would still make plans, but with humility. They would still work, but without panic. They would still hope, but not with clenched fists. They would still pray, but not as a bargain. They would still love, but not as a contract against change. So if you are in a place of uncertainty now, perhaps this teaching is for you. Continue to act wisely. Continue to care. Continue to do what is wholesome and true. But let go of the illusion that peace can only come after total control is achieved. Control is a mirage. Clarity is possible. Effort is possible. Presence is possible. Peace is possible, even in an unfinished world. Some listeners may now wonder, if everything changes, if results cannot be controlled, if loss is inevitable, then why strive at all? Why love? Why work? Why build? Why try to become better? This is an important question, and the Buddha's teaching answers it with great beauty. We do not strive in order to imprison life. We strive in order to participate in life consciously. We do not love in order to guarantee permanence. We love in order to embody truth, generosity, and compassion while we are here. We do not practice goodness because it will buy us a world without change. We practice goodness because goodness is how the awakened heart moves through a changing world. Imagine a flower. It blooms for a short time and then fades. Does its impermanence make it meaningless? No. Its briefness is part of its beauty. The fact that evening comes does not make morning worthless. The fact that music ends does not make music useless. The fact that a child grows up does not make childhood empty. The fact that a conversation ends does not make the conversation false. Temporary does not mean trivial. Passing does not mean pointless. In fact, impermanence gives urgency to love and dignity to effort. Because time is limited, your choices matter. Because life is uncertain, your attention matters. Because each day can vanish, your kindness matters. Because the future is not guaranteed, your integrity matters now, not later. A teacher once wrote the word "someday" on a piece of paper and held it up before the class. Then he asked, "How many beautiful things die inside this word?" Someday I will begin. Someday I will forgive. Someday I will rest. Someday I will speak truth. Someday I will meditate. Someday I will tell them I love them. Someday I will live as if life is precious. The room became quiet. Everyone understood. Impermanence is not telling you to stop planting because winter will come. It is telling you to plant while you can. It is not telling you to stop singing because the song will end. It is telling you to sing sincerely. It is not telling you to stop walking because the road has no final possession. It is telling you to walk awake. This is why the Buddha praised diligence. He did not say, "Everything passes, so do nothing." He said, "Because conditions are unstable, practice now. Train the mind now. Purify the heart now. Speak kindly now. Release hatred now. Wake up now. One day the chance will end. The person who understands impermanence most deeply is often the one who values life most sincerely. They waste less time on vanity. They waste less energy on unnecessary conflict. They become more available to what is real. They know that today's meal, today's sky, today's conversation, today's chance to practice patience, today's opportunity to be honest, these are not small things. They are the field in which awakening ripens. So yes, keep striving, but let your striving become wise. Work hard, but do not lose your soul in ambition. Love deeply, but do not turn love into ownership. Build meaningful things, but do not imagine they are your permanent refuge. Practice sincerely, but do not demand instant perfection. In a world of impermanence, the most beautiful effort is effort without clinging. Another area where impermanence can transform us is in the way we see conflict. Often when someone hurts us, we freeze them in one moment. We say, "This person is cruel, selfish, unworthy, impossible." We take one painful event and carve a permanent identity out of it. Yet the Buddha's teaching asks us to look more deeply. What conditions moved through this person? What pain shaped their speech? What ignorance shaped their action? What fear is living behind their behavior? This does not mean we approve of harm. Boundaries may still be needed. Justice may still be needed. Clear speech may still be needed. But hatred begins to soften when we see that all beings are conditioned. The person who lashes out today may be living with wounds from long ago. The one who betrays may be driven by craving they do not understand. The one who lies may be terrified. The one who clings may be lonely. The one who dominates may be inwardly weak. A monk once asked how to deal with an angry person. The reply came, "First remember that anger is visiting them like fire in a house. If you enter with your own fire, the whole place burns. If you enter with clarity, perhaps not." This is the practical wisdom of impermanence. States are changing. Anger is not a permanent self. Fear is not a permanent self. Confusion is not a permanent self. If you react to someone's temporary poison with permanent condemnation, suffering multiplies. There was a woman whose father had been harsh and distant for many years. She carried resentment into adulthood and felt justified in every memory. Later, after he became ill, she began helping care for him. One afternoon he spoke, with tears in his eyes, about the violence and neglect he had known as a child. For the first time, she saw not only the father who hurt her, but the frightened boy who had never learned tenderness. Her pain did not disappear, but hatred loosened. She said later, "I still remember the wound, but I no longer worship it." This is an important distinction. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is not pretending the wound was harmless. It is releasing the identity that keeps both yourself and the other person frozen in a single moment of pain. Impermanence allows healing because it reminds us that no one is only their worst hour, and no one is forever trapped in the shape they once took. The same is true for yourself. Many people hold on to guilt for years, as if one chapter must define the whole book. They replay old mistakes and say, "This is who I am." But the Buddha's teaching says, "Look again. Conditions have changed. Understanding can grow. Remorse can become ethical resolve. Pain can become compassion. A broken past does not have to become a permanent prison. So when conflict arises, ask not only what happened, but what is moving here? What is changing here? What can be learned here? Where can wisdom enter? The moment you stop freezing yourself and others into fixed identities, a little space appears. In that space, compassion becomes possible. Meditation, in many ways, is the laboratory where impermanence becomes visible. Not as an idea, but as direct experience. Sit quietly for even a few minutes and watch. A sound arises, then fades. A thought appears, then disappears. An itch comes, then changes. A memory enters, then dissolves. An emotion swells, then shifts shape. Restlessness rises, peaks, and falls. Calm visits, lingers, and moves on. The mind is not one solid block. It is a stream of events. This is why meditation is so powerful. It teaches through observation rather than theory. You begin to see that every state changes when it is met with awareness. Even a strong emotion, if not fed by story, transforms. Fear is felt in the chest. Anger burns in the face. Sadness presses behind the eyes. But when attention stays with the raw experience, without adding endless narration, the state begins to reveal its impermanent nature. At first, this can be unsettling. Many discover how unstable the mind really is. They see how quickly moods change, how fast thoughts multiply, how easily the heart is captured. But this is good news, not bad. Because if all mental states were fixed, liberation would be impossible. The very fact that they shift is the doorway to freedom. A young man once complained to his teacher, "When I meditate, I become even more aware of my anxiety." The teacher smiled and said, "No, you are becoming aware of the anxiety that was already there. The difference is that now you are seeing it instead of being secretly ruled by it." Continue. In time, seeing becomes freedom. This is a profound truth. Many people are run by unseen habits because they have never sat still long enough to watch them. They think they are choosing, but often they are reacting. They think their anger is justified. Their fear is reality. Their craving is necessity. Meditation begins to expose the machinery of mind. Then wisdom can intervene. One of the simplest contemplations in meditation is to observe the breath. Each in-breath arises. Each out-breath passes. No breath can be held forever. Even life itself is revealed in this rhythm of appearing and vanishing. The breath teaches surrender with every cycle. Receive, release. Receive, release. To fight this rhythm is exhaustion. To align with it is peace. If you have never sat with impermanence in silence, perhaps begin gently. Watch one breath from beginning to end. Watch one sound come and go. Watch one thought without chasing it. Watch one feeling soften. You do not need to create impermanence. It is already showing itself. You only need to become intimate with what has always been true. And as this intimacy deepens, fear changes. You stop being surprised by movement. You stop requiring each moment to freeze. You stop assuming that discomfort is forever. You become more patient with your own inner weather. You learn that a difficult state is not an order to obey. It is an event to observe. Meditation does not always make the mind quiet quickly, but it gradually makes the mind honest. And from honesty comes wisdom. From wisdom comes non-clinging. From non-clinging comes a peace that the world cannot easily steal. Sometimes the hardest impermanence to accept is not the loss of things, but the loss of dreams. A person may carry a vision for years, a marriage they expected, a career they planned, a family pattern they hoped to heal, a place they wanted to live, a future they carefully imagined. Then life unfolds differently. The dream cracks. The picture in the mind no longer matches reality. Many suffer not only because life changed, but because the inner image had become sacred. The Buddha teaches us to see that images are also conditioned. Dreams can inspire, but they can also bind. When a dream becomes identity, its loss feels like death. Yet sometimes what dies is not possibility, but fantasy. Sometimes the ending of one imagined future is the doorway into a truer one. There was a man who longed to become famous in his field. For years he pushed himself relentlessly, convinced that public recognition would finally quiet the unease in his heart. He did achieve a measure of success, but not enough to satisfy the hunger. The more he received, the more he needed. Eventually, a serious health problem forced him to stop. At first, he felt humiliated, as though life had stolen his meaning. During the months of recovery, he began helping at a small community center simply because he had time. There, away from praise and competition, he discovered a quieter joy in being useful without applause. Years later, he said, "Losing my dream saved me from worshiping it." This is not true in every case, but it points to something important. Not every broken dream is a tragedy. Some are merciful. Some expose an unconscious attachment. Some strip away false motives. Some reveal that what we wanted was not actually what would free the heart. Still, let us be honest. The grief of a lost dream can be deep. Someone may never have the child they hoped for. Someone may never return to the health they once knew. Someone may never receive the love they longed to receive. Someone may reach old age and see that certain doors have closed. In such moments, the mind may cry out, "Then what was all this for?" The Buddha would not answer that with shallow comfort. He would bring us back to direct seeing. In a changing world, not every wish can ripen according to preference. But meaning is still possible. Virtue is still possible. Awakening is still possible. Love is still possible. Inner freedom is still possible. Even in grief, these remain open. When one dream falls away, it is often because life is asking a deeper question. Can you live without making one outcome your God? Can you remain kind without receiving what you wanted? Can you stay truthful in disappointment? Can you bow to reality without becoming bitter? This is difficult, yes, but it is also sacred work. If something in your life has not become what you hoped, do not rush to conclude that your life is empty. Sit quietly with the broken pieces. Let the false shine fall away. Ask what remains when the dream is gone. Sometimes what remains is pain. Sometimes humility. Sometimes prayer. Sometimes a simplicity you never knew before. And sometimes, beneath the grief, the first hint of freedom. There is also a social dimension to impermanence that many overlook. Communities change. Cultures change. Economies change. Political seasons change. Friend groups change. Even moral values in society can shift over time. When people place their ultimate safety in social stability, collective identity, or external systems, they may become overwhelmed whenever the world becomes uncertain. The Buddha lived in a world that also knew instability, conflict, class difference, sickness, aging, death, and political change. His teaching did not deny these realities, but he placed the deepest refuge elsewhere. Not in the promise that society would always be fair, not in the promise that rulers would be wise, not in the promise that circumstances would remain favorable. He pointed to refuge in awakening, in ethical living, in mindful awareness, in wisdom, in the Dharma that can be practiced under many conditions. This matters today because many minds are exhausted by the speed of change around them. News changes every hour. Markets shift. Technology reshapes human relationships. Public opinion turns quickly. A person can feel ungrounded, as though standing on shaking earth. The temptation is to search for certainty in loud opinions, rigid ideology, or blame. But these often become another form of clinging. A wise person remains informed, but does not feed endlessly on agitation. A wise person cares about the world, but does not hand over the entire nervous system to every headline. A wise person acts where action is possible, serves where service is needed, and remembers that inner stability cannot be outsourced to collective conditions. A village elder once told the young people, "Storms will come to the valley. Some will shake the roofs, some will flood the fields, some will break old trees. You cannot stop every storm, but you can learn where to build your house." This is what the Buddha teaches. Build your house on ethical conduct, on mindfulness, on compassion, on insight. Build it in a place deeper than passing events. This does not mean withdrawal from society. It means bringing a stable heart into society. The world needs people who are not easily manipulated by fear. It needs people who can respond without hatred. It needs people who can remain human while conditions change. Impermanence, when understood, can make us more responsible, not less, because we see how quickly harm spreads. We see how precious trust is. We see how fragile life is. We see how urgently compassion is needed. If you feel overwhelmed by the changing world, remember this. Your task is not to control the whole river of history. Your task is to keep wisdom alive in the section of river where your hands can reach. Speak truth where you are. Offer kindness where you are. Refuse cruelty where you are. Return to breath. Return to clarity. Return to the heart that does not need the world to be stable in order to remain sincere. Let us come now to the heart of peace. What is the calm that arises when impermanence is truly understood? It is not the calm of someone who has arranged life perfectly. It is not the calm of someone who is never challenged. It is not the calm of someone who has succeeded in controlling all conditions. It is the calm of non-resistance to reality. Non-resistance does not mean passivity. It means the inner war begins to end. The mind stops shouting at the rain for being wet. It stops shouting at old age for arriving. It stops shouting at endings for ending. It stops demanding guarantees from a world made of movement. In that ending of argument, a quiet strength appears. A lake becomes clear not because the wind obeys us, but because mud settles when there is no constant stirring. In the same way, the heart becomes clear when grasping weakens, not because life stops moving, but because the mind stops fighting movement as though it were a personal attack. There are people who appear strong because they are hard, but hardness often breaks. Then there are people who appear soft, but inside they are like bamboo. They bend and do not snap. This is the strength born of wisdom. It is flexible because it is aligned with truth. It knows that clinging creates unnecessary pain. It knows that resisting change cannot stop change. It knows that openness can survive what rigidity cannot. A woman who had endured many losses was once asked how she remained so composed. She answered, "I stopped asking life not to be life." What a profound sentence. Most people spend years doing exactly that. They ask life not to age, not to leave, not to end, not to surprise, not to wound, not to move. But life remains life. The Buddha invites us to awaken not by conquering the river, but by learning its nature. The peace that follows is not dramatic. It may look simple from the outside. More listening, less panic, more gratitude, less complaint, more humility, less judgment, more presence, less haste, more tenderness, less possession. Yet inside, something enormous has changed. The person is no longer building home on what cannot hold. If you want to know whether wisdom is ripening in you, perhaps do not ask how many spiritual ideas you understand. Ask simpler questions. When plans change, how quickly do I become hostile? When someone criticizes me, how long do I remain poisoned? When I lose something, do I collapse completely? When I feel pain, do I add layers of resistance? When life is beautiful, do I rush past it without gratitude? These questions reveal practice more than elegant words ever can. The Buddha's path is practical. It enters the kitchen, the office, the hospital, the family, the marketplace, the lonely room, the aging body, the grieving heart. It asks, can you remember impermanence here? Can you soften here? Can you stay awake here? Can you be kind here? Peace is not hidden in another world. It is born when the war with this world begins to cease. Let me offer you a simple image. Imagine the sky and the clouds. Thoughts are clouds. Emotions are clouds. Praise and blame are clouds. Gain and loss are clouds. Youth and age are clouds. Meeting and parting are clouds. Even identities are clouds. Some are bright, some are dark. Some move slowly, some gather into storms. But the sky does not become damaged by the cloud that passes through it. The Buddha's teaching gently turns our attention toward the sky-like quality of awareness. This does not mean there is some separate self hiding above experience. It means that when mindfulness is present, we discover a spacious knowing that is not identical to each passing state. Anger can be known. Fear can be known. Joy can be known. Grief can be known. Because they can be known, they are not the whole of what is happening. This realization changes everything. Instead of drowning inside each mental event, we begin to relate to experience more openly. Thoughts are seen as thoughts, not commandments. Feelings are seen as weather, not identity. Memories are seen as echoes, not prison walls. Cravings are seen as waves, not masters. A man struggling with anxiety once described his breakthrough in very ordinary words. He said, "For years, every anxious thought felt like a prophecy. Then one day during meditation, I saw a fearful thought arise and pass like any other sound. It was still unpleasant, but it was no longer a king on the throne. It was just another visitor. That moment gave me hope. This is exactly why impermanence heals the mind. It dethrones our passing states. It reveals that we do not need to obey every internal movement. We can witness. We can breathe. We can choose. We can refrain from turning every cloud into a permanent climate. And yet, awareness is not cold distance. The sky does not reject clouds. It allows them. In the same way, wise awareness does not reject human feeling. It allows sadness without drowning in it. It allows joy without clinging to it. It allows pain without making pain the whole truth. This is loving wisdom. If you are carrying a heavy emotion today, perhaps try a gentle shift in language. Instead of saying, "I am broken," try saying, "Brokenness is being felt right now." Instead of saying, "I am hopeless," try saying, "Hopelessness is visiting the mind." Instead of saying, "I am ruined," try saying, "Pain is here and changing." These are not tricks. They are ways of restoring space and seeing clearly. The more often you practice this, the more you begin to trust movement. You no longer panic at every dark cloud because you have seen clouds pass before. You no longer worship every bright cloud because you know that too will move. You begin to love the sky more than the weather. You begin to value awareness more than passing content. This is a quiet liberation. Now I want to speak very gently to those who are grieving right now. Those who have lost someone, lost health, lost direction, lost a relationship, lost a home, lost a version of life they thought would continue. Impermanence may sound wise, but in the middle of grief, it can also sound sharp if heard wrongly. So let us be careful. The teaching is not asking you to stop loving because everything ends. It is not asking you to force yourself to be calm before your heart is ready. It is not asking you to recite philosophy while tears are rising. The Buddha's way is more compassionate than that. He invites you to bring awareness into grief slowly, like lighting a candle in a dark room, not to erase the darkness instantly, but to help you walk inside it. Grief is love meeting impermanence. That is why it hurts. If there were no love, there would be no grief. So do not be ashamed of sorrow. Do not think tears mean failure. Sometimes tears are the most honest prayer the heart can make. Let grief move. Let the body feel what it feels. Let memory come and go. Let the ache speak. But alongside this tenderness, allow a little wisdom to enter when it can. The one you loved was never outside the law of change. Neither are you. The time you shared was always precious because it could not last forever. The pain you feel now is part of having loved a transient being in a transient world. This is not punishment. This is the cost of loving in the realm of change. A man grieving his wife once said, "I keep thinking I should have had more time." An old nun replied softly, "No one is promised enough time." We are only given this mysterious, temporary sharing. Her words did not remove his grief, but they removed a subtle accusation he had been holding against life. Sometimes grief becomes heavier because the mind keeps negotiating with reality. It says this should not have happened. It says more time was owed. It says, if only I had done this or that, change would not have come. Some regrets are useful. They can teach us to live better, but endless bargaining with impermanence often deepens suffering. So grieve, yes. Remember, yes. Love, yes. But when you can, let wisdom place one hand on your shoulder. It whispers, all things dear to us are subject to change and separation. Therefore, love deeply now. Therefore, be kind now. Therefore, awaken now. Not because loss is beautiful, but because truth can make the heart more spacious than despair. And if your grief is still raw, please be gentle with yourself. One breath at a time is enough. One honest prayer is enough. One small act of care is enough. Impermanence also means this grief will not feel exactly the same forever. It will move. It will shapeshift. It may never fully leave, but it will not remain in one form. In time, pain can become tenderness. In time, memory can become blessing. In time, tears can sit beside gratitude. For those who are not in grief, but in daily restlessness, impermanence is still your teacher. Restlessness often comes from living as though fulfillment is always elsewhere. When I get that job, then I will rest. When I find that person, then I will rest. When I fix this flaw, then I will rest. When I reach that number, then I will rest. But life keeps moving the finish line. Desire says, not yet, not enough, not here. The Buddha saw this clearly. Craving is fed by the illusion that one more acquisition, one more recognition, one more change in conditions will secure lasting satisfaction. Yet because all such conditions are unstable, craving remains thirsty. Even after gain, fear appears. What if I lose it? After achievement, another target rises. After pleasure, the mind asks for repetition. This is why unchecked desire cannot bring final peace. Impermanence helps us by exposing the game. It shows that every pleasure fades. Every possession changes hands. Every status shifts. Every excitement cools. This does not mean pleasure is evil. It means pleasure cannot carry the burden of ultimate refuge. Once we stop asking it to do what it cannot do, enjoyment becomes simpler and less desperate. A traveler once kept filling his bag with beautiful stones from every place he visited. At first, each stone delighted him. Soon the bag became heavy. He could hardly walk. An old woman on the road asked why he carried so much. He answered, I do not want to lose the memory of any place. She smiled and said, perhaps the places were meant to pass through you, not to be dragged behind you. So he began leaving the stones one by one. With every release, his steps became lighter. This is a perfect image for the heart. How many experiences, disappointments, trophies, grievances, identities, and cravings do we carry long after their moment has passed? No wonder the mind feels tired. The Buddha's invitation is not to become empty in a dead way. It is to become light enough to live. If you always feel rushed, examine what secret promise you are chasing. If you always feel dissatisfied, examine what permanence you are demanding from temporary things. If you always compare yourself with others, remember that their conditions are also changing, their victories also unstable, their private sorrows also unseen. A life of wisdom can still include beauty, pleasure, art, laughter, friendship, and meaningful work, but these are held differently. There is more enjoyment and less addiction, more gratitude and less hunger, more appreciation and less grasping. This is because impermanence has been seen not as an enemy, but as the truth that keeps the heart honest. So tonight, ask yourself one gentle question. What am I carrying that was only meant to be experienced, learned from, and released? The answer may be a memory, a resentment, a role, a comparison, an old dream, a fear. Whatever it is, perhaps you do not need to drag it into every tomorrow. As this reflection begins to draw toward its final stillness, let us return to the central insight. Calm does not come because life finally obeys you. Calm comes because understanding ripens. When the truth of impermanence is no longer just a concept but a lived seeing, much unnecessary struggle falls away. You still care, but you do not cling in the same way. You still feel, but you do not drown in the same way. You still act, but you do not worship results in the same way. The awakened heart is not a heart without movement. It is a heart no longer enslaved by movement. Joy comes, and it is appreciated. Sorrow comes, and it is held with compassion. Success comes, and humility remains. Failure comes, and dignity remains. Praise comes, and balance remains. Blame comes, and balance remains. This is the fruit of seeing things as they are. One of the simplest summaries of wisdom might be this: everything changes, therefore be awake. Everything changes, therefore be kind. Everything changes, therefore do not delay what matters. Everything changes, therefore do not build your home in what cannot stay. Everything changes, therefore cherish this breath, this meeting, this chance to practice, this ordinary sacred day. If this reflection has touched your heart, you might carry it into the quiet after the words end. Perhaps return to Buddha peaceful mind whenever you need a gentle reminder to come back to what is real. And if this space supports your practice, you may leave a small sign of presence through a like, a follow, or a subscription. Not for noise, but so these teachings may continue to find the hearts that need them. Before we close, let me ask you two final questions to place inside your own contemplation. When change next knocks on your door, will you meet it as an enemy or as a teacher? And in the life you still have before you, what will you stop postponing because you now remember that everything precious is passing? Take a slow breath and feel the humility of being alive. You do not own this moment, yet here it is. You cannot hold it, yet you can honor it. You cannot keep the flower from fading, yet you can smell it now. You cannot stop those you love from changing, yet you can love them wisely today. You cannot prevent your own body from aging, yet you can walk with reverence through the days that remain. This is not a tragic vision, it is a luminous one. The world of impermanence is fragile, yes, but it is also radiant. Because things do not last, tenderness is meaningful. Because moments vanish, attention becomes sacred. Because life is uncertain, awakening becomes urgent. May you see change without fear. May you love without chains. May you act without clinging. May you grieve without despair. May you breathe inside this fleeting life with clarity, humility, and compassion. And when the mind trembles, may wisdom remind you gently that the wave is not separate from the sea, that passing forms do not touch the deepest peace available to an awakened heart. All conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. In that turning, the heart becomes light. In that lightness, peace is possible. In that peace, even this changing life can become a path to freedom. And perhaps the most beautiful transformation of all is this. When impermanence is deeply accepted, ordinary life becomes enough to teach you. You do not need dramatic events to remember the Dharma. The warm cup cooling in your hands teaches it. The sound of evening fading into night teaches it. The child outgrowing their shoes teaches it. The fruit ripening and then softening teaches it. The wrinkles around the eyes of those you love teach it. Even the silence after a song ends teaches it. Then practice becomes intimate. Washing dishes can become contemplation. Seeing steam rise from soup can become contemplation. Sweeping fallen leaves can become contemplation. Hearing laughter disappear down a hallway can become contemplation. You start to understand that wisdom is not hidden from daily life. It is revealed by daily life when seen clearly. A monk was once asked where enlightenment could be found. He answered, "In the sound of the bowl after it is struck, because it appears, vibrates, fades, and vanishes. In that vanishing, if you truly listen, there is teaching." This may seem small, but it is not small at all. The whole universe speaks impermanence in every direction. We suffer because we keep demanding a different language. So train yourself in gentle observation. Notice the first sip of tea and the empty cup. Notice the morning light and the evening shadow. Notice how irritation rises over little things and then dissolves. Notice how joy visits unexpectedly. Notice how a difficult conversation that seemed impossible becomes just another memory. Notice how the body asks for rest when once it asked for speed. Notice how the heart that once wanted attention begins to want peace. These are not random details. They are lessons quietly shaping your freedom. The person who sees impermanence everywhere does not become gloomy. They often become more alive, more receptive, more sincere. They stop postponing wonder. They become easier to forgive because they know life is brief. They become slower to hate because they know everyone is passing through conditions they do not fully understand. They become less arrogant because they know nothing they possess is securely theirs. They become more thankful because they know this meeting will not happen forever. This is why saints, sages, and deeply peaceful people often seem so simple. They are not chasing 10,000 illusions at once. They are standing in contact with what is real. Their laughter is free because it is not built on denial. Their silence is deep because it is not empty. Their love is warm because it is not a contract. They have learned that the changing world cannot give permanent shelter. And strangely, in accepting that, they become more at home in the world than most. If you wish to begin practicing this teaching in a very practical way, start with small moments. When a pleasant moment comes, quietly say to yourself, "This too is changing," so let me enjoy it without grasping. When an unpleasant moment comes, quietly say, "This too is changing, so let me endure it without despair." When a difficult emotion comes, say, "Let me feel it without becoming it." When a beautiful experience comes, say, "Let me receive it without trying to imprison it." You may also reflect each morning, "I too am of the nature to age. I too am of the nature to grow ill. I too am of the nature to die. Everyone and everything dear to me is of the nature to change. My actions are my true belongings." This reflection is not meant to darken the heart. It is meant to clear it. It brings seriousness without heaviness, tenderness without sentimentality, urgency without panic. At the end of the day, ask yourself, what did I cling to today that brought suffering? What changed today that I resisted? What beauty did I overlook because I thought there would always be another chance? These questions slowly refine the heart. And when you fail, because all practitioners fail again and again, do not turn failure into identity. Notice it, learn, bow, and begin again. Even confusion is impermanent. Even forgetfulness is impermanent. Even the habit of clinging can be transformed with repeated seeing. The path is not walked in one perfect step. It is walked in many honest returns. Some people wait for a dramatic spiritual event, but often awakening grows quietly, like dawn. One day, you notice you are less reactive than before. One day, you forgive more easily. One day, you do not chase praise so hard. One day, a disappointment comes and does not break you in the old way. One day, you watch a sunset without secretly asking it to stay. One day, you sit beside someone you love and feel gratitude instead of fear. These are precious signs. They mean wisdom is entering the bones. So do not underestimate small understandings. A single moment of clear seeing can save hours of suffering. A single breath taken with awareness can interrupt anger. A single remembered truth can soften grief. A single act of letting go can change the direction of a life. Impermanence is not only the theme of grand philosophy, it is the immediate teacher in every ordinary hour. If these words have brought you a little peace, carry that peace outward. Speak gently to someone. Offer patience where you would usually offer irritation. Put down one burden you do not need to keep carrying. And if this reflection may help another heart, you can also keep this circle alive by staying close to Buddha Peaceful Mind, so that together we continue returning to what frees the mind and opens the heart. There is another misunderstanding people often have. They think letting go means losing something. But in the Buddha's teaching, letting go is often the ending of unnecessary weight. A clenched fist thinks opening is loss. A free hand knows opening is relief. Consider how much energy is spent protecting mental possessions. Old insults, old images of how life should be, old expectations about who others must be, old versions of ourselves that no longer fit. The mind stores them like heavy furniture in a house that has become too small. Then it wonders why there is no room to breathe. A traveler once arrived at a river carrying a backpack full of stones. Each stone had a word written on it. One said resentment, another said regret, another said pride, another said fear, another said who I used to be, another said what I deserved. By the time he reached the riverbank, he was exhausted. There he met a boatman who offered to take him across. But the boatman looked at the bag and said, "The boat can hold you, but not everything you insist on carrying." The traveler hesitated. He had become used to the weight. It felt familiar. It even felt like identity. Yet as he removed the stones one by one, he felt something unexpected. Grief, yes, but also lightness. By the time the boat touched the far shore, he understood that he had not left himself behind. He had left behind what was keeping him from crossing. This is what impermanence asks of us again and again. Not, can you destroy feeling, but can you stop worshiping what has already changed? Can you release the demand that yesterday must return? Can you stop carrying identities that no longer serve compassion or truth? Can you stop clinging to pain as proof that something important happened? Can you allow even beautiful chapters to close without making a prison out of memory? The seasons teach this well. Spring does not accuse winter for ending. Summer does not try to freeze the blossom at its first opening. Autumn does not refuse the falling leaf. Winter does not apologize for bare branches. Each season comes completely and leaves completely. Human beings, however, often try to live in spiritual spring forever. We want the beginning without the ending, the blossom without the falling, the warmth without the cooling, the meeting without the parting. This is why the heart becomes tired. A woman once said that every time her children reached a new age, she mourned the age they had just left. When they stopped needing her hand to cross the street, she missed the small fingers in her own. When they no longer ran to tell her every little story, she missed the old closeness. An older friend told her gently, "If you spend all your time grieving the child that has passed, you will not meet the child who is here." Those words changed her. She realized that clinging to one form of love was keeping her from receiving the next form of love. The bond was not ending, it was changing. She could either fight that truth or grow with it. So much of wisdom is exactly this: learning how to keep meeting life in its new form. The friend is older now. The body is slower now. The relationship is quieter now. The dream is different now. The role has changed now. The house is emptier now. The mind is humbler now. If we insist that meaning only exists in the former shape, suffering multiplies. But if we learn to ask, what is life becoming here? What is love becoming here? What is my practice becoming here? Then change becomes less of a thief and more of a teacher. Letting go also has a hidden generosity inside it. When you stop demanding that people fulfill your old script, you give them room to be real. When you stop demanding that your own life resemble the plan you once worshipped, you give reality a chance to reveal a wider path. When you stop clinging to one emotional weather pattern, you give the heart room to breathe. This is why the Buddha's path is not about becoming empty in a cold way. It is about becoming spacious. Spacious enough for endings. Spacious enough for uncertainty. Spacious enough for grief. Spacious enough for joy. Spacious enough to let life arrive and depart without constant violence from the mind. If you are struggling to let go of something right now, start very gently. Do not ask the heart to release everything in one breath. Simply notice what you are holding. Notice the fear underneath the holding. Notice the story that says, if I release this, I will disappear. Then breathe and remember, you are not being asked to stop loving. You are being invited to stop turning love into chains. You are not being asked to stop remembering. You are being invited to stop living backward. You are not being asked to erase your past. You are being invited not to live buried inside it. Impermanence also reveals the miracle of forgiveness toward oneself. Many people understand, at least intellectually, that other things change, but they refuse to grant change to their own heart. They keep a courtroom inside. In that courtroom, an older version of themselves stands forever on trial. The sentence is never complete. The evidence is repeated daily. The mind says, you failed there. You harmed someone there. You wasted years there. You should have known better. You are still that person. The Buddha's teaching cuts through this cruelty with sober compassion. Yes, actions have consequences. Yes, unskillful deeds matter. Yes, truth must be faced. But no one is served by turning remorse into identity. Wise remorse cleanses. Unwise remorse imprisons. The difference is whether the heart learns and opens, or merely circles its own pain without transformation. There was a man who had spoken harshly to his mother for years during the busiest season of his life. He always told himself that he would make it up to her later, after work slowed down, after stress eased, after he had more time. Later did not come. She died unexpectedly, and he was left with a pain that followed him for years. He tried to punish himself into goodness, but self-hatred only made him more closed. One day, while helping care for elderly people in a small home, he found himself listening to stories, serving tea, adjusting blankets, and sitting quietly with those who were lonely. Slowly, he understood something. He could not change what had happened, but he could let remorse become tenderness. He could let pain become service. He could let impermanence teach him not to delay love again. He said later, I stopped asking how to undo the past and started asking how not to waste the heart I still have. This is the right question. Not how do I become untouched by my mistakes, but how do I let truth humble me without destroying me? The Buddha's path is always concerned with the end of suffering, not the perfection of an image. If guilt leads to honesty, restraint, compassion, and transformation, then it has served a noble purpose. If guilt becomes endless self-obsession, then it has become another form of clinging. The same applies to shame around weakness. Some people are ashamed of how slowly they heal. Some are ashamed of returning to old habits. Some are ashamed that they still grieve, still fear, still crave, still need reassurance. But impermanence means growth is often uneven. Tides move in and out. The path twists. Some lessons return many times before they are fully learned. This is not proof of worthlessness. It is simply the nature of conditioning. A tree does not become mature in one afternoon. A wound does not always close in a straight line. Some days look like progress, and some days look like returning. Yet under the surface, roots may still be deepening. The Buddha knew this, which is why patience is such an important perfection on the path. Patience with others, yes, but also patience with one's own unfolding. If you have been carrying regret, perhaps tonight you can sit with it differently. Do not push it away. Do not make a shrine to it either. Ask it, what are you trying to teach me? Then listen. Maybe it asks you to apologize. Maybe it asks you to change a habit. Maybe it asks you to become more tender with those who are still here. Maybe it asks you to stop postponing what matters. In that way, impermanence turns even your failures into teachers. And if you have judged yourself as permanently broken, remember this: the thought that says you are hopeless is itself impermanent. The identity of failure is impermanent. The tightness in the chest is impermanent. The numbness, the confusion, the fear, the shame, all of these are conditioned states. They arise, they pass, they can be met, they can be understood. They do not own the entire sky of your being. A compassionate spiritual life does not say, become flawless before you deserve peace. It says, begin where you are, see clearly, act wisely now. Repair what can be repaired, grieve what cannot, and let each honest step loosen the chain of yesterday. In a world of impermanence, there is room for redemption, because no darkness remains unchanged forever. Before we end, let us rest in one more simple story. A novice once asked an elder, "Master, what is the secret of peace in this changing world?" The elder poured tea into a small cup until it was nearly full. Then he waited. The novice watched the steam rise and vanish. After a while, the elder said, "Do you see? The tea is warm, then less warm. The steam appears, then disappears. The fragrance is strongest now, and soon it will fade. If you drink while insisting that warmth must not cool, you miss the tea. If you refuse the cup because it will empty, you miss the tea. Peace is to drink while warm, knowing it will cool." The novice was silent. The elder continued, "Life is like that. Parents, children, friends, strength, health, praise, sorrow, ideas, all of them are warm for a while. If you cling, you suffer. If you refuse to love, you suffer. So the middle way is to receive, appreciate, and release. This is enough. How much suffering comes from not drinking the tea? Some people are so afraid of loss that they never fully open to love. Some are so afraid of change that they never truly inhabit the present. Some are so obsessed with preserving experience that they do not experience it at all. The Buddha's teaching is wonderfully direct. Life is here, changing. Meet it. Learn from it. Do not sleep through it. And perhaps this is why truly wise people are often surprisingly gentle. They have seen how quickly anger wastes precious time. They have seen how pride looks foolish before death. They have seen how little of what the world chases can follow us beyond the final breath. They have seen that tenderness is not weakness, that humility is not defeat, that simplicity is not lack. They have seen enough impermanence to stop pretending that the heart is nourished by possession. If you take only one thing from this long reflection, let it be this: nothing in this life was promised forever, and yet so much has been given. This breath, this listening, this moment to understand, this chance to love better than yesterday, this chance to release one fear, this chance to speak one honest word, this chance to bow inwardly to the truth instead of fighting it. So walk more slowly, listen more carefully, forgive more freely, touch the ordinary with reverence. Let the child's laughter be fully heard. Let the old face before you be fully seen. Let the taste of simple food be fully known. Let the evening sky be enough for one quiet minute. Do not wait for perfect conditions to live a sacred life. Impermanence has already made this life sacred by making it unrepeatable. When the final day comes for any of us, may it not find us saying, "I was too busy resisting reality to notice the miracle." May it find us saying, "I did not own life, but I honored it. I could not hold what was passing, but I loved well while it was here. I could not prevent change, but I learned to bow to it without fear. I did not escape sorrow completely, but I did not waste my whole life fighting the law that touches all things." And now, as these words come towards silence, place one hand on the heart if you wish, and feel the living truth there. This heartbeat is changing. This breath is changing. This body is changing. This mind is changing. And within this changing life, wisdom can awaken. Compassion can awaken. Freedom can awaken. That is the great hope of the Buddha's teaching. Not that the world will stop moving, but that the heart can stop being a prisoner of movement. May you leave this reflection a little softer, a little clearer, a little less afraid of endings, and a little more faithful to what matters. May impermanence no longer appear only as loss, but also as teacher, purifier, and doorway. May you remember, again and again, that the peace you seek does not lie in making things stay. It lies in seeing clearly, loving gently, and letting the river flow.